Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and wherever you are in this wonderful world that we live in. My name is Jason Cooper. This podcast series is the Global Sales Leader. It's all about people with brilliant and intriguing strategies to great effect that help people, obviously, and organizations grow. For me, I'm a sales strategist, sales coach. I help people deliver better results by sales training. But also, for me, it's all about building good relationships with people and helping people understand how relationships work for now and in the future, because you just don't know. So there's a methodology that I use within that really helps people for great effect. But today, my very special guest is Mike Stevenson. So welcome, Mike.
I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
You're absolutely welcome. So a little bit about Mike. Mike never fails to inspire his own journey, which is also very inspirational, from homelessness to award-winning entrepreneur filled with remarkable people and events. He's founded Thinktastic, an innovation agency voted by Scottish Small Company of the Year 2008, and claimed for his unique approach to stretching people and organizations beyond their apparently possibility. He's done lots of other work, lots of other collective work. So I'm really happy to speak with you, Mike. So you're very welcome.
Thank you.
So, Mike, tell me a little bit of sort of anchor points along the way, your journey that describes what you do and what sort of changed along the way.
Well, I mean, I think life is full of learning points when you recognize them. And when you can use that learning to inspire and guide people, it becomes of value. So let's go back to school. I hated school, and I was thrown out of school at the age of 15, which wasn't the best start, because you're brought up to believe that you pass or you fail exams along the way. Now, I didn't set an exam at school because I never got that far. So what I learned from that is that you can be cast with a description, and that has got absolutely no bearing on what you actually have to offer. Because I discovered, fairly soon afterwards that, I could sing, I could perform, I could engage people in conversation, I could tell stories. But then I ended up out on the streets in London. And what I learned then was that, I had a personality that I could survive. And knowing that you're a survivor is really important. Nowadays, we talk about resilience. So I discovered that despite being an asthmatic, throughout my life, and being told all the things I couldn't do, which would exacerbate my asthma, I actually did them all. Those things I shouldn't do. And not only did I survive, but I thrived. My health, suffered a few times, but I got stronger. I built, my body up, and all those things. So those early discoveries were diamond. But then I went into a whole succession of jobs, and I learned in each one of them. And people don't recognize sometimes that, whatever job you're doing, there is learning there. There's rich learning there. I learned how to engage with customers. I learned how to sell. I learned how to, do things around the house, because I was in the building trade. So I was able to, when with a girlfriend, we bought a house, which was just an empty shell. I did everything but the plumbing. Plumbing terrifies me. But I did everything, the plastering, the flooring. I built a bed for us, all of those things. So that is the value of learning. And I also learnt, I think, more importantly through all of this, that human psychology is something that you identify, at different points in your learning. I've been at the lowest rung, I've been at the highest rung, and I've seen, what good leadership is. I've seen what bad leadership is. I've seen what motivates people and what doesn't motivate people. And I always go back to this story. when I was working the building trade, and it was the kind of first introduction to great leadership. And I arrived in this building site, and I was a bricklayer's assistant, a hod carrier.
Mhm.
And every building site I'd arrived on, it was the same. This is what you got to do. This is when you got to do it by. And this was a Welshman, and he welcomed me with open arms. And he put his arm around me. Before you start, I want to show you something. And he showed me into this hut. And he showed me the plans, and he says, this is the palace you're building. And I felt this surge of energy, because I realized then that you could have lots of people doing jobs, but those jobs cannot make people feel they're part of a larger project. They don't even know what the project is. So here was a man who brought everyone together, who made them recognize that they were part of an enormous undertaking, one that would be a legacy, which people would look on for years. So that was a huge moment of awakening, particularly around motivation. So, now I do speaking. I've been called a motivational speaker, and that is where I learnt it all. It hasn't come, it's been learnt along the way. So the value of that learning, I can now use to speak and inspire people.
That's awesome. I like that. So give me an example of how motivation works, and especially intrinsic motivation for sales organizations and that. How can you inspire people to work with you as if you're the leader, but you're working behind them, pushing them up, as opposed to pulling them up the hill, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I have worked in so many workplaces where the word demotivation would be the overriding concept that drives them extraordinarily. And I think it starts, leadership for me is about bringing out the greatness in others, and also recognizing that people you employ are better at something than you are. There's no point in employing people who, look up to you because you've got a superiority of skills. That's an absolute nonsense. And it's about, being very clear on vision. It's about, giving people responsibility and authority. And that responsibility should be a unique responsibility. There's no point in saying you are a. No one wants to be a. They want to be the. And that's a very critical point. So when you feel that you've got value to the organization, when you feel that you have got a unique offering, then, and you're given the space and the ability to make things happen and to be creative in pursuit of this vision, you suddenly find yourself, working at pace and working with an enthusiasm. But so many organizations don't do that. And so when I've worked with organizations, when I work with organizations now, because I'm using Zoom, what you do is you enter into a wholly new narrative, because you say, this is the purpose of the organization. You explain it in a very simple, plain English, motivating way, rather than, we have got, a mission to do, which just makes you fall flat. Because is it the same mission as other organizations? The chances are it is. So what makes you distinctive as an organization? Once you've got that, and I'm very good at finding, I'm a bit of a pearl fisher, or an oyster catcher. It's how you hone in on what makes an organization utterly distinctive. And from that, you can create, this energy, and you can get people being creative about how they can achieve beyond, expectation. And that's a starting point.
I love that. That's a really good way of looking at it and sort of reframing how you see that. The question I was going to ask is purpose, and how can people, sales professionals, leaders, really find their purpose, and what makes them get up in the morning? Because you've said along the way that you stepped forward and you said from you can't do that, but you've actually achieved that. So you've obviously set your intent in a really good way. I really like to find out how people like yourself actually sort of plowed through that and had that purpose. I know that Carol Dweck has the grit analogy, which is really wonderful, and I've looked at that. But what is your grit? What is your purpose? What made you push through all of that?
Well, can I tell you a story, which to me wraps purpose up in a jar. I was in South Beirut 2 days after the bombing. I think it was 2006 or 2008, and I was there because my mother's Lebanese and her sister was dying. So I got there the first opportunity to fly in because the airport had been closed for a couple of days. And I went to South Beirut, which was not where my aunt lived. She died just before I arrived there.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to make some sense of what was going on in Beirut. So I went to South Beirut, and it was rubble everywhere. I mean, you cannot imagine, what the impact of targeted bombing like that is. So you're wandering around the rubble, and you're breathing in this dust, and you're seeing all the accoutrements of day-to-day life, buried under the rubble, cars, children's toys, bits of clothing. And it is an extraordinary experience because it shows you the utter destructiveness that humanity can impose. But there, amidst the rubble, was a man selling clothing. And the guy that was with me said that used to be his shop. So my instinct was to say to him, it must have been horrible to lose your shop. And he shrugged his shoulders and he said, I'm not a shopkeeper. I give people style and confidence. And he's selling clothes, by the way. So here was the perfect example of purpose over vehicle. Yeah. And it's something that I've carried with me ever since. And I think I've carried it for most of my adult life, that, what we mistake is the vehicle for the purpose. So, we've seen during lockdown, we've seen, really top signature restaurants staying alive because they would say their purpose is to tantalize taste buds, not to have a restaurant. So, I've had deliveries here of all the ingredients, with all the sauces wrapped up, all in a frozen pack, to do it yourself with all the instructions there, all these unique flavors and sauces, and the ingredients which are, the best of, produce in Scotland. So their purpose is not to have a restaurant. Their purpose is to bring, delight to people's taste buds. So the purpose overcomes the vehicle. And if the vehicle stops, being available, your purpose never changes. That's the signature around purpose. And it's a very profoundly powerful thing. Because if you've got purpose, my purpose is to inspire, is to engage, is to help organizations make that leap forward by engaging with their people. And I'm talking about leaps forward, not just small baby steps. Because when you engage people in this discussion and you agree that they have a purpose, they might have a vision, but the purpose is what drives people. That's what gets people up in the morning. And when you engage people around that purpose, suddenly you release them to be, quite extraordinary, to come up with ideas, to break through the departmental barriers that holds them back, to collaborate, not only with people inside the organization, but with people outside the organization. For example, I was working with a housing association in Glasgow for the past few weeks. I've got this series, and I call it Cold to Gold. And it's a 6-part series, and it engages people at every part, right? And, all of a sudden, we're talking about, bringing arts organizations in, to look at the environment, bringing environmental organizations in, working with a company like Dulux, for example, who've got a community foundation. Can we colour the houses? Because we know that colouring houses, as was experimented with in Tirana, reduces crime, for goodness sake. It raises spirits. It does all sorts of things. But if you stay within your sphere of influence, you can only do some of those things that you dream about doing. If you engage with others, then you spark something in them. They become part of your purpose and they can contribute to that. So older people's playgrounds, this was pioneered in Finland when they were looking at, completely reshaping the health of the Finnish people. All of those things become part of the solution when you widen your scope and you begin to build collaborations. But first, you have to have a really solid purpose. And is the purpose of a housing association to give people homes? Yes. But it doesn't end there.
Yeah.
It's to raise people's horizons. It's to give them, to stimulate the local economy, to give people lifelong security, to make them feel that they are valued members of this community. And as valued members, there's expectations on them to do something. So that's the beauty of purpose and how you can engage people around purpose rather than around the company's, modus operandi. Because if it's wrong, if it's right, you can add to it. If it's wrong, you can transform it.
Love that. That's a really good explanation on purpose and how that works. So, I really admire the way that you sort of pivoted the idea. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I'm sure a lot of companies out there are just thinking about their mission statement as opposed to driving forward from that and go, well, what is the purpose of the company? What do we actually do? So I like the analogy of scintillating the taste buds, what restaurants do. So that's awesome. But mine is inspired to build better sales teams through relationships that last. So that's my purpose. And that's how I built that, because I do believe that to be true. So regardless of how I do it, it makes no difference. But that's how my intent. So looking at the sort of strategies now about engaging with clients remotely, how do you see success with that, and how can we sort of pivot that going forward? Because it's it's going to be very slow for us getting out of where we actually are now, but it will happen eventually. But how do you see that?
Well, I listen. I'm a recent arrival on the whole Zoom revolution, or whatever these platforms are. So it took me a while, and the first thing I had to do, I went and did method acting lessons online, because I'm brilliant on stage. I mean, I can say that. I bring energy. I move around. I know I have to stand to think. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was to say, how can I improve my presence on this platform? Because, I don't want to be a tailor's dummy sitting there. So I had to find animation and how you can use some of the drama techniques to bring alive this conversation that you're having with people. And it is a conversation. It is. In a room, you can engage with people. You can see their eye movements. You can keep eye contact with everyone. You can test yourself by looking at nuanced movements in the room. You can speak to people beforehand so you get a sense of what the real issues are. You can bring people up in your stories. For example, I was speaking at an event, obviously, this is before lockdown, and I go up and speak to people and say, what's your job? And this girl said, I'm just an administrator. So I was able to use that. And I was able to ask her, because I'd asked her permission. So, I think it was Haley. Haley, what's your role in your organization? She says, I'm the engine oil that drives all the departments. And suddenly everyone looked around and there was an energy came from that. So I was able to say, don't ever describe yourself as just And, an administrator says nothing. It says absolutely nothing. I was at a business network meeting, and you know what they're like. You sit around a table. Well, you used to. Now it's all online. And this guy next to me says, I'm an insurance salesman. Now, most people want to run to the toilet because you don't want to be sold insurance unless you're at that particular moment, you have a need. So I spoke to him after the event and I said, look, why don't you say to people, I help people sleep at night? And he thought about it, and he says, yeah, I'll try that. But he still looked a bit skeptical. And I met him months later, and he said, you know that piece of advice you gave me? It really works. He says, and it's great because it's a conversation starter. I say to people, people in the network, I help people sleep at night. And then someone will say, why do you give them Rohypnol? Do you hit them over the head with a baseball bat? Are you an anaesthetist? And he says, no, I find them the perfect insurance package to protect the family, themselves, and their business. And that changes the conversation.
Yeah.
Because your purpose is not to sell insurance. That is the mechanism you use. So it changed that. Now, from that, I got AXA Business Insurance, have involved me in an advert which came out 4 years ago. And I recorded another one just before lockdown. And sadly, that's not come to fruition. But it shows you how, you can have a conversation which you then tell at an insurance conference in Edinburgh, and then it reaches the ears of a big insurance company. So That's the power of purpose. And this is how you can take, that understanding of purpose and bring it to an audience and excite them around it. And, Zoom challenged me because I wasn't able to do that. So I learned the acting, or I updated my acting skills. So that improved my online presence, I hope, and it's improving every time. And then I took it out. But the challenge now is, how do you sell? So LinkedIn is a great source, but I haven't mastered the art of selling on LinkedIn because it's a tiger's pit out there. Everyone is doing it. And I think I've got an offer that, beats so many other people, but I have to make sure that stands out in the crowd. And I think, telling stories helps you to do that.
Absolutely. There's a lot of neuroscience around this in how the brain works. In terms of there's a thing called the mirror neurons inside the front of the prefrontal cortex in the front of the brain. But what they've discovered is when you tell a story, I'm actually in the story. I'm actually, when you describe it, exactly what you just said, I'm actually there. I'm actually in it. So when they did some scientific research around this and put probes in the head and all that, of both people, they found the same areas were lighting up between you telling story and me listening. So, which goes to prove the power of memory and the power of igniting the senses and central information. And a lot of it online and in what you're doing, and is what you do is you pivot what you have got into the real world. Nothing's changed. It's just the delivery is just online as opposed to a larger audience, because you're creating trust and credibility, which you have.
Yes.
So it's when you deliver that's when people will hear it, and that's when people engage with it and they like and love you for what you've done. So how do you see trust and credibility in stuff that you've done? Because I think it's transferable.
Well, I sometimes you work with people across sectors, and if you want the best possible example of storytelling, it is Disney. Because Disney films have I'm not going to go through their kind of technique here, but they are brilliant storytellers, and it starts, everyone remembers stories from childhood.
Yeah.
And it goes brilliant, brilliant. Is how Disney, and now Pixar, because Disney owns Pixar, how they layer stories so that adults can love it, so that children can love it, and they all pick out something different from it. But the message is the same, that, you know, people fall down, they get up, and they eventually triumph. And that is the essence of Disney storytelling. So I brought, you know, with a partner down in England, we brought Disney over to do 2 masterclasses in Scotland, and they were successive years. And what that brought out was, you know, how you engage people. Because right from the very off, you know, the presenters, they show a picture of themselves in the city they've arrived in. So they immediately identify with something that's very Disney-esque. So you can imagine, first photograph, them standing at Edinburgh Castle, which is in itself Disney-esque. But, you know, what I learned from that is that Disney doesn't mess around with, you know, low-level objectives. It doesn't muck around with, you know, this is what we do. It creates magic memories for people. Now, to create magic memories means that every single person in the Disney Corporation has a responsibility to do that. So, you know, you don't have, you know, excuse me, you're just the cleaner. You know, I'm the memory maker here.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that, because if the cleaner or someone who's sweeping up sees something that makes them think, oh, I have to intervene here to make sure that people have a magical experience. So a child looking anxious or a family looking around, you know, what am I going to do next? They intervene. And that's brilliant. Equally, if a director is walking around and they see a bit of litter that is, you know, ruining the experience, the visual experience, they will go up and pick it up. They won't look for a cleaner to do it. So it is this collective responsibility around a really big, you know, daily purpose to bring people, you know, into a magical experience and create memories that will last for a lifetime. Now, I think that's really exciting. So if, you know, the third most frequently asked question at Disney in Florida is, you know, when is the 3 o'clock parade? Now, the tendency would be to roll your eyes and say, well, it's at 3 o'clock. No, that doesn't happen. What Disney does is it uses that experience that they have, knowing that people will ask questions because of anxiety. They ask the wrong questions. We've all done it. And I've got lots of stories about how people have asked what appears a stupid question because they're feeling anxious. And what the Disney person will say is, oh, I'm so glad you asked me that, because it is at 3 o'clock today. We're going to be on time. So you take away that potential for it's 3 o'clock, you know. And then they say, I know a brilliant place for you to stand because, you know, I see you're from Scotland and you don't want the beating sun because you're not used to 44 degrees centigrade. And they'll take them to a place and they'll say, by the way, this is in front of the cooling ice cream vans. So you get first dibs in the ice cream and you get this cool blast. That's how they do it.
Yeah,
they don't have, you know, warning signs, because that, you know, if you say something that warns people of a danger, then you increase the chances of that danger happening. It's just basic human psychology. If you say to someone, oh, watch that, you might trip, the chances are they're going to trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So the Tower of Terrors, for example, at Disney, when someone, you know, arrives, a family arrive, they've got a rule, health and safety, that you can't, you know, under a certain height, you can't go on this.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
Right. So they don't say, excuse me, you're too small. They say, they get down on their knees and they say to us, a child, how would you like to go on a tour that your mum, your brother, and your big sister and your big brother can't go on? And every child says yes. So they take them on this tour, and the other members of the family go on the Tower of Terrors thing. And when they come back, they say, you know, we're going to measure you up now. And when you reach this height, here's vouchers to come back your family, right? Now that is genius. And if
Yeah.
you think of all the interactions that you have on a daily basis, and you've got the choice to create something fantastic, make people feel fantastic, to create a memory for them, or you just interact on a basic, commercial basis. The difference is profound. So, stories are the food for all of this. And if you create in your staff the ability to tell stories, to create those experiences for each other as well, because we often forget that one of our customers are other people inside the organizations. If you create,
absolutely.
if you create this culture where people are all creating, magic moments for people, epiphany moments, then you have created something extraordinary. So I have worked with organizations to achieve this, and it is quite extraordinary. I've helped organizations go into the top, 10 best organizations to work for. Now, that tells you something. When your staff are signing up to something that says, we love working here because we're listened to, we've got a head of steam, we make things happen, we've got a responsibility for the customer experience, and we don't want the customer experience to be an ordinary one. Why should we? Because it's an ordinary distinctive, and it's blindingly obvious when you speak about it, but it's not blindingly obvious in most organizations, because they struggle to say, well, look, we've been around for a long time, it's very hard to move a tanker. You say, no, it's not. You're not moving a tanker. You're moving a flotilla of little ships, and that makes it easier. And
absolutely,
part of that is inspiration, part of it's motivation, but part of it is actually anchoring the organization around something that's bigger than any of them. Southwest Airlines, their mission statement to what was it? A warrior spirit and a fun-loving attitude. How motivating is that? Their vision to be the most loved and most profitable airline in the world. Loved. Spelled L-U-V. Because, we need our organizations now, whether they're small businesses or large businesses, to move from being just a brand to being a love mark. Now, this is a concept I heard from Saatchi and Saatchi Europe a few years ago, and it's a great one. So you think of those brands that, you have got a friendship for life. But if they break the friendship, if they do something, you might go to a restaurant for years, you get a bad meal, boy, that can put you off for life, and you don't go back there again. So and that excites people. It doesn't put them off. It excites people that they're part of this, culture of creating, wonder and, magic, and leaving people's mood uplifted. And why not?
Absolutely, I love that. That's a really good. I love the story, and I love the metaphors that you've given in there, because that's transfer, and it helps people to jump on the same ship as opposed to going off in different directions. So that's something that I like to do when I work with clients, is to teach them how to do a story and how to tell it to their clients, because then it will resonate a lot more. Question I was going to ask you, Mike, is if you were asking yourself a question, what question would you ask yourself about helping people forward? If you were interviewing yourself?
Well, I would say, there are lots of people around who call themselves motivational speakers. Lots of people around who call themselves organizational transformation specialists. So what makes you stand out? Well, what makes me stand out is I'm 70 now. I don't broadcast that because I don't feel it. I don't think I look it, and I certainly don't sound it. So I bring an enormous amount of experience of being at every level of organizational, structures. I have worked, I had a marketing design company for 19 years, which is really, really solid grounding. How do you work with organizations? How do you create the messages that really capture people's imagination? So I've learnt over a long time, and I've been speaking over a long time. So, I have seen public speaking courses, and I think that's fine. But the real essence of speaking is not being able to structure. It's not being able to tell stories. It's not being able to do any of these things. It's how to be persuasive, how to influence the audience. So I don't go in and say, here I am going to speak, and if any of you want to listen to it, that's fine. I leave memories behind with people, memories, nuggets. And I've learnt this from a lifetime of hearing storytellers and telling stories. And you will remember, what someone said. Yes, but you will remember how they made you feel. Now, as a speaker, I go in, how do I want people to feel? That's the first thing. And then what do I want them to remember for the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
What do I want them to do from the minute they leave this auditorium or this conversation? So those are the three measures I have. And it is from a lifetime of experience of knowing what has prompted me to do something, what has turned a switch in my head. So that's what I bring. Because, as soon as you say, people describe me as a motivational speaker. So it's a search engine thing. And, it doesn't do you any good to say, I'm a speaker with a difference, because it doesn't really qualify in all the search engines. But that is what I bring. It is the ability to leave people with something that they will carry and prompt them to do something for the rest of their life. Now, I know this, I've researched it, because I have met people or talked to people 10 years after. I mean, I'm not that old, and they will remember what the story was and what it made them rethink and what it made them do. So that's influence. Speaking is different.
I to ask you actually is, it's not to throw you out, but it's more of a creative one, because I know you're a creative thinker, and I know that I speaking to you over the last couple of weeks and seeing what you posted and all that. So if someone gave you a magic pill of some description, not to clear COVID or anything, but if you had a magic pill and it transformed you into something, but gave you a magic ability to do something, what would it be, and what would you use it for? You personal, professional?
I think I would use it to reach people with my message, and actually to see through buildings, through walls, see what goes on, so that I understand, and I could go with a really ready pitch. Because and even when I was in business and we were doing really well, winning awards, winning extraordinary contacts, I had to bring people in from outside. I had to, because I could not make that assessment myself. I could make assessments about the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet shows good profit. But how do people feel? What kind of image are we projecting? It's all very well to judge your image by the spreadsheet, but a spreadsheet can be a very fragile thing, because someone can come in with something better, something wholly different. So I think it's be able to see through walls. That would be my superpower.
Awesome. That's incredible. But this podcast is all about global sales leader, and definitely you're one of them. And because sales is all, we're all selling all the time. We influence each other at all times. We influence our kids, we influence our husbands, wives, and all of that all the time. But having the know-how to build an effective story is incredible. And that really touches people on all emotional levels. So you've definitely given that gift forward to people today. So I thank you for that. And how can people find out more about you, Mike?
Can I tell you a very quick story?
Of course you can.
I was in a house, and the mother was getting very fractious. She said to her our child, he was a wee boy. Go and tidy your bedroom up. It's an absolute tip. And he says, no, I hate tidying my bedroom. And I said, can I ask him a question? And she said, yes. I said, what would your bedroom look like if David Beckham was coming down this evening? And he ran off and he transformed his bedroom because the question was framed in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay. People can get a hold of me through thinktastic.co.uk or mikestevenson.net. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Mike Stevenson. So I would love to, even if people are asking me just for a bit of advice on how they can, get out of a sticky situation. But, the world is full of opportunity now. The opportunities are opening up like never before. And I'd love to talk to you. And thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're absolutely more than welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You've really sort of enhanced this podcast, and you've given some golden nuggets. And that's what I always want to give people forward as a gift when they listen to this, so they can go, well, I'm going to apply that to my life. I'm going to do that. And like, if they contact you or if they contact me, happy days. But it's the gift forward that's it's the inspiration to inspire people to think slightly differently. And that's what this podcast is all about. So look, I thank you so much. It's been really educational. It's been really inspirational. And I thank you so much. So Mike, have a wonderful day. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you. And everyone who watches this, have a great day and step forward with confidence and boldness. Thank you, Jason.